Listen. Today we will be comparing episode 510, Mercy Shall Follow Me, with The Fiery Cross and A Breath of Snow and Ashes. Now, if you haven't read the books or watched the episode yet, please be advised, spoilers are coming. The title Mercy Shall Follow Me comes from A Breath of Snow and Ashes, chapter 117, Surely Justice and Mercy Shall Follow Me, as opposed to Surely Goodness and Mercy Shall Follow Me. Our episode opens in Wilmington, and you see Stephen Bonnet sitting there with Gerald Forbes. One thing I forgot to mention, in our novels, his name is Neil Forbes, and our show changed it to Gerald Forbes. I'm not sure why they did that, don't know. Now, the main driving force of our episode version is Stephen Bonnet trying to get a hold of River Run. If you will recall from a prior episode, we see Forbes and Bonnet again at meeting, where Forbes tells Bonnet that his son is now the heir to River Run, meeting young Jemmy. In our novels, we don't really see any of these meetings between Bonnet and Forbes happening in real time. But you may not have caught this because it was just a quick kind of line in the episode where Forbes tells Bonnet something to the effect of, you know, the authorities turn a blind eye to your smuggling practices, but they're not gonna turn that same blind eye because I hear that you may be trading goods of a female nature. This line is sort of taken from A Breath of Snow and Ashes, but the roles are reversed. In A Breath of Snow and Ashes, it's actually Forbes who has Brianna kidnapped from River Run as a way of paying back Jamie for stepping on his honor, because there's a prior event where Jamie is single-handedly facing down a rebel mob because he doesn't want to see a loyalist guy being tar and feathered, and you know, it's kind of like one versus a mob, and Forbes is one of the people in the rebels, and you know, him and Jamie are having a little thing, and Jamie embarrasses him, you know, puts a little tar on his clothes and puts some feather, and everyone's laughing at Forbes. You know, Jamie kind of turns the tide, I guess, of the fight so that, you know, just to save someone's life. So it's actually Forbes in our novel who is having Bree kidnapped and trying to sell her into slavery. If you remember back to episode 6, Better to Marry Than Burn, we had seen Claire talking to Philip Wiley, and Philip Wiley mentions his associate, Stephen Bonnet. Then we had Jamie set up a meeting with Philip Wiley as the liaison between Stephen Bonnet and Alexander Malcolm, Jamie's middle names, as to get Stephen Bonnet to smuggle out some of Jamie's whiskey. This, of course, is just a trap to try to get rid of Stephen Bonnet. A lot of the events in this episode take place in the Fiery Cross, in Part 9, A Dangerous Business, where Roger and Jamie are trying to set this trap to get rid of Stephen Bonnet once and for all. However, in our novel's timeline, Brianna does not get kidnapped until right towards the end of A Breath of Snow and Ashes. So our show combined these two factors where it's we need to get Bree back, but we need to get rid of Stephen Bonnet once and for all. In the Fiery Cross, young Ian does not appear until right at the very end of the novel, so he is not a part of the battle at Wiley's Landing. Now, our show took that previously set up meeting that Jamie made with Philip Wiley as Alexander Malcolm and put Ian as Alexander Malcolm. Ian is gonna pose as, you know, this made-up character, one of Jamie's many aliases. So the battle at Wiley's Landing takes place with Jamie, Roger, and Ian posing as Alexander Malcolm. The sting operation quickly goes awry, however, when Ian's at the landing and the men come over and, oh, you must be Captain Bonnet. And they say, no, the captain's not coming. So Roger, Jamie, and Ian's plan to get rid of Stephen Bonnet, well, he's not there. We can't do this right now. Where is Stephen Bonnet? He's in Wilmington. Where are Claire and Bree? They're in Wilmington. A few more things happen in the Fiery Cross during this battle at Wiley's Landing. There's actually a Russian family that comes in that are going to sell Wiley all these pigs, these Russian boars, as it were. And so you feel really bad for this family because they kind of get caught in this crossfire. You know, they don't really know what's going on. They don't really speak much English. And they just had the bad luck of showing up when Jamie and Roger, remember, not Ian in our novel, are there to try to kill this captain. But they do help Jamie and Roger out, and none of them really get hurt. Philip Wiley also appears at Wiley's Landing because he's there to pick up these boars that he bought. So, you know, you see Philip Wiley, even though in our novel we're not really seeing it, but you see Philip Wiley kind of in the opposite form of how he appears in society. You know, he's not all plastered, made up, as Mrs. Tryon says, an insufferable dandy. He's, you know, he's there to do work. So it's like this flip-flop, okay, this is the Philip Wiley that no one sees. And even though, you know, Wiley and Jamie are still towards each other, Wiley seems genuinely concerned for Roger and Jamie and all the stuff that's been going down because he and Bonnet do not have any business relationship in our novels. So Philip Wiley offers Roger and Jamie hospitality, even though, you know, his pride is still a bit wounded. But you see, okay, in our book, Philip Wiley's not that bad of a guy. Chapter 103 of The Fiery Cross, Among the Myrtles, is where Claire and Bree encounter Stephen Bonnet. In our novel, there's actually quite a bit more at stake when this encounter takes place. Why? Because it's not just Claire and Bree. In our novel, it's actually Claire, Bree, Marcelly, and the kids are there too. So the kids are in danger as well. As I mentioned earlier, this is not where Bree gets kidnapped. So what ends up happening is, you know, Claire does exactly what she does in the show where, you know, Bonnet takes Claire and is gonna kill her, and Claire's just like, shoot him, just get rid of him. You know, it doesn't matter what he does to me, he's just gonna keep doing this, so you need to get rid of him. So in our novel, Marcelly actually shoots Bonnet, but just like how Bree shoots him in the show, the powder's wet, you know, they're by the ocean, it's damp, and it misfires. But Bree happens to have another pistol safe and warm in her skirts, and she shoots Bonnet in the crotch, and he runs away. So at this moment, you know, we don't know what has happened to Bonnet. You think maybe he died, but he's probably not going to bother us that much anymore because I've also severely wounded him even if he's not dead. Now in our show, with having only Bree and Claire on the beach, Claire wakes up and Bree's gone, as well as Bonnet. Claire goes to find Jamie, Roger, and Ian to tell them that Bree has been kidnapped by Bonnet. Once they're back in Wilmington, they find Philip Wiley in the street, and at first Philip says he doesn't know anything where Stephen Bonnet could be, where he has a hideout, but, you know, they threaten to cut his throat, and then he squeals, of course, because he's a coward. What I did not like at all in this episode was trying to make us feel bad for Stephen Bonnet. They were trying to make us have sympathy for the devil, as it were. So there's a lot of moments where Bree is at Stephen Bonnet's hideout, and you see Stephen Bonnet saying stuff like, oh, I want to learn to be a gentleman, and, you know, you and I, fate has brought us together, and we can be parents to Jeremiah. Well, I've heard the phrase learn to love, so you could learn to love me. And I remember in the after episode summary where the producers were saying, you know, Stephen Bonnet isn't Blackjack. And it's like, yes, he is. He's just the pirate Blackjack. He is just as much of a monster as Blackjack Randall. It just obviously manifests a different way because he's a different person. There was one element to this Bonnet Bree thing that the show did that I liked. Obviously, Bree is trying to play the part, you know, go along with this ruse that, okay, I'll teach you to be a gentleman and maybe I can learn to love you, because she wants to escape and obviously get back to Jemmy and Roger and everyone. And they had Bree pulling out a book, you know, to read to Stephen Bonnet, so obviously to keep him off of her, but also she's reading just like a book about engineering or something, but she starts reciting Moby Dick, and it's clear that it's not Moby Dick, obviously, but I think it's really cool that she, you know, knows the story so well, and so she's pretending to read it. At this point, we have Bonnet bring up this sort of reoccurring nightmare he has about drowning and the sea taking him. You know, that's his biggest fear. And so I like that they brought that element back, because in the Fiery Cross, what's interesting is Bree actually has this dream herself of, you know, being in the dark and seeing a wave and seeing Stephen Bonnet's face, you know, being haunted by Bonnet. But Bonnet sees this wave and he's freaking out. He's the one terrified. So I think it was kind of interesting in our novel how it's actually Bree having this dream of Stephen Bonnet's worst nightmare and worst fear. Now the show did turn Bonnet back to the monster that he is, where Bree says, I'm gonna go ahead and get Jemmy so, you know, he's not afraid, and I'll tell everyone because they're gonna be quite shocked. And so Bonnet says, okay, well, we'll seal this with a kiss, and Bree's trying her best, but when they pull away, Bonnet's like, I know what a kiss is and what it's not. And that's where you see his monster side come out again. And I think that's the moment where he decides, okay, yeah, I'm just gonna sell her as a slave. Meanwhile, Bonnet has had a prostitute sent to his lair, and as soon as Bonnet leaves the room, Bree goes to her and says, look, go, please tell my family, you know, my dad is James Fraser, my husband's Roger Mackenzie. Find them and tell them where I am, that I'm being held captive. And, you know, you see the prostitute is very scared because she doesn't want to cross Bonnet. In our novel, Bree does convince Eppie, the prostitute, to take her ring, and Bree just has to have faith that, you know, she's not just going to go and sell this for money, that she's actually going to go find her family and tell them. In our show, Eppie does not take Bree's ring, so Bree is just filled with despair, and she just thinks, how are my family, how are they going to find me? They don't even know where I am, and it could be too late. I could be sold as a slave. The information that Jamie, Roger, and Ian got out of Wiley in the street was that Bonnet frequents this certain brothel. So you see Claire and Jamie going into the brothel, and they're there to, you know, question everyone. And that is where they encounter Eppie. You see Claire using her knowledge as a doctor because she notices Eppie has a limp and notices, oh, her legs are, you know, one leg is longer. But I think she can just sense that Eppie knows something about Bonnet. So Claire helps with her hip problem, and then also gives her some money, and that is how Claire and Jamie and everyone figure out where Bonnet's lair is. Now, in our novel, Eppie is good to her word because there's a character that we haven't met at all in our show, and maybe we'll meet next season, named Manfred, and he and Eppie are an item, and so she must have told him. So Manfred's like, okay, we gotta find Jamie and Roger and tell them, and Roger sees Bree's ring and he's just, stunned silence, but they figure out where his hideout is. In our novel, this hideout is quite difficult to find. There's many trees and forests, and it's quite rugged, hard to moor a ship, and they're really struggling to find out where there's a house on this island. And an interesting thing that happens is Roger actually comes across another portal to the future. So, just thought I'd mention that. And the area is called Ocracoke. Our show and our novel basically do the final showdown with Bonnet and Bree being kidnapped the same. They get Bree back, Bonnet runs off, but they get him and he's, unconscious. But Bree makes the decision, no, we're gonna take him to have justice done on him, and we're not gonna be the ones to kill him. Our show took it the direction of, we'll just get a hold of Governor Tryon in New York because he still owes us for hanging Roger, ruining his voice and almost killing him, so Tryon will help us out. But in our novel, they don't even worry about that because Bonnet is such a well-known pirate. They know he's going to get justice done on him. Well, all this stuff with Bonnet and Bree is happening. Our show actually adds one more element, and that's at River Run. We see Forbes come in, he's got an air about him. You can sense he's too good for the place. And because he is already worked out with Bonnet, okay, when you are the Lord of River Run, you'll give me a percentage and I'll be super rich. We see Jocasta wanting to update her will, and because Forbes is her lawyer, she has him there, writing out the updates. She wants to give, some more money to Marsley and Fergus because now they have another child. And when Jocasta says she wants to give Lizzie a little bit of money to get her started, you see Forbes just snap. And he goes over to Jocasta like, you can't give away my money, and he tries to kill her. And so Jocasta's struggling, and Ulysses must have just been just outside the door and heard the sounds, and Ulysses comes in and he kills Forbes, and it's just like, awesome. Our show ended our episode with Stephen Bonnet finally being brought to justice. You see his punishment is being drowned, which was his worst fear. So his absolute worst fear has come true, and that's his punishment. And then Bree comes up with a gun and she shoots Stephen Bonnet before he can drown. And Roger asks her, was that for mercy, or was that just to know he's dead? And Bree doesn't say anything. In our novel, Bree and Roger actually row a little boat out to the post where he's drowning, and she says, go with God, Stephen. And then she kills him. So I always like that line in the book. This episode had a lot of intense moments for sure. There were a lot of parts that I liked, but I really did not like how they tried to make us feel bad for Stephen Bonnet. I really enjoyed the whale pod that Claire and Bree saw on the beach, and I just loved that Ulysses was the one to kill Forbes, and I just thought that was an awesome ending of Forbes in our show. Thank you so much for watching the Outlandish comparison. Please subscribe, turn on notifications, and I'll see you real soon.
All that was fair, all that was